How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is the alternate ending to What If Deku Had a Perfect Copy Quirk. And now, let's begin. Izuku being pulled into the portal, he would instantly turn around, flicking the hand that was pulling him, gripping his neck hard, pulling him into the portal off. As Izuku would see Shigaraki trying to stab him with a needle. However, he would grab Shigaraki's arm before disintegrating it. As Shigaraki would look on in shock, his other hand would end up being grabbed as well, being disintegrated as well. Now, with Shigaraki being basically quirkless, not being able to use his quirk, he would end up staring directly down at his two nubs of his former hands. As he would just look on in shock, he would be knocked out by a flying fist of Izuku. As Izuku would look on towards the other people standing around him, as he would then just smile. So does anyone want to go down just like Shigaraki here? Or are you gonna just give up now? Since you're all gonna end up being defeated anyway, it doesn't really matter. The villains wouldn't let Izuku take them down so easily. They weren't going to go down without a fight, as they would all try to jump Izuku simultaneously. Without the teamwork that Izuku had built up at UA, they wouldn't be able to do such a thing. Izuku had knowledge of teamwork. These guys didn't, and so they weren't able to work together. As all of them would try to jump Izuku, they would bump into each other, sending others flying back, as Izuku would use this opportunity to knock out the people coming at him, before quickly and swiftly knocking out the others around him. As all of a sudden, a knock on the door would be heard, as Izuku would go to open up the door, where a fist would end up being sent flying through, going right through the now open door, as the person throwing the fist would end up stumbling forward, as they would now see Izuku standing in front of them. "Oh, Izuku! So glad I finally found you where you were." As All Might would then peer into what Izuku had done, as he would end up seeing all throughout the room, as there was bodies laying everywhere. "Yeah, we should possibly put court-canceling handcuffs on all of these guys pretty quickly." All Might would nod his head, as police would come flying into the building, putting handcuffs all over them. However, All For One, watching this through a security camera, wasn't about to have any of this, as gray goop would start to form out of nowhere, materializing, as he would then reach his hand out as if trying to grip Izuku's neck. However, Izuku would see this, dodging it before gripping All For One, pulling him forward. "So, All Might, I finally decided I should probably copy your quirk. I've been thinking about it and decided I should need your permission, since it is basically my quirk to copy anything." As All Might would just look on in shock, not realizing that Izuku could have just copied his quirk all along. As All For One would then laugh. "Well, if it isn't the copycat. I've heard much about you and your copying quirk. I heard it's quite strong. I can't wait to get my hands on it." As Izuku would just sort of laugh. "Oh, you think you're going to be able to defeat me? That's simply not the case, All For One, as I've already copied your quirk and All Might's. With All For One and One For All now in my grasp, I now have the perfect combination, all for all. You simply don't stand a chance against me." All For One would simply just laugh. "Do you know how many years I've been a villain, kid? I have far more combat experience than you'll ever have. Oh, if so, you'll know not to draw on a losing battle." As Izuku would then jump towards All For One, smashing his fist, plunging it into All For One's breathing device, completely shattering it in two, as the two halves would fall down, making a thump noise down on the ground. As All For One, now not being able to breathe as well as he could with his helmet on, he would know he wasn't going to win this fight, or if he was going to have to take out both All Might and Izuku quickly. However, before anything else could happen, both Izuku and All Might would end up throwing punches side by side, landing it right on All For One's head, bashing it inwards, denting All For One's head, basically sending him flying back into the wall, as shards of wood would end up toppling over right onto All For One, as the TV hanging right above him would end up dangling there, as the wire would end up cutting, just being split in two, sending it flying directly down onto All For One, shattering the TV screen directly on top of All For One's head. As All For One, now with a concussion, would try to get up, however everything would look dizzy, as police would end up rushing in, and with the help of All Might and Izuku, they would put on enlarged canceling handcuffs. So they would then throw him into the back of a cop car. It would then speed off into a very high security prison where he would then be locked down into a very quiet room where no noise would be heard, just plunging all for one into madness, not being able to hear anything, only if someone were to come visit him. However, many people didn't, as he was tied down relentlessly with quirk canceling devices surrounding him, making sure he would never be able to use his quirk again. As all of this would end up being happening, Izuku would go back to UA, where everyone would greet him, as Uraraka would jump into his arms, crying that she's so glad that he's back, as Izuku would just laugh. Yeah, I'm glad I'm back too. It's been rough having to be kidnapped by the League of Villains so many times. However, we shouldn't have to worry about them any longer. Me and All Might pretty much took care of that. As any of the students who don't watch the news would look on in shock, as Bakugo would then laugh. Well, that stupid Izuku managed to defeat All for One of the craziest villains that even All Might couldn't defeat in years prior, but now with the help of Izuku, I guess things changed. As everyone would look on in shock, as Izuku would just sort of laugh. Well, I guess I'm quite the strong one, ain't I? As many of the class would just nod their heads, being like, yeah, Izuku, of course you're strong. You're Izuku, after all. You have main character powers. As would happen, months would end up passing. Izuku and his class would end up getting their quirk licenses, easily passing through and defeating the competition. As with the help of Izuku, they were easily able to do it. However, with Izuku's reputation now being splattered all over the news as the one who helped All Might defeat one of the major villains, everyone wanted to target them. Everyone wanted to get a piece of what Izuku had and his reputation had become. As with all of this, Izuku knew that people were going to be targeting him in Class 1A even more than if Izuku had just stayed quiet and stayed in the shadows. And so with that, they would have a little bit of trouble, with some of them almost being knocked out. But with the help of Izuku, like I said, they would easily be able to get their quirk licenses, and with the help of Aizawa ingraining into their mind, knowing that teamwork is how you become a hero and how heroes are forced to work. Heroes that don't use teamwork are never going to be successful, and so with that, they were able to use teamwork to take down the villains during the final part of the licensing exam, while also saving many people, mostly with the help of Uraraka with her extensive rescue training from Izuku and Bakugo. As the years would end up passing, Izuku, Bakugo, and Todoroki would end up becoming the next big three at UA. Uraraka would be the big four if there was such a thing, but it doesn't exist. She was on the cusp of making it in, but everyone knows she wasn't going to beat Todoroki anytime soon, being Todoroki being the third best person on the new Big Three of UA. However, before we get into the UA graduation, one thing happened during the work study. Izuku, of course, wanting to know further and wanting to have more knowledge, would end up going to just Night Eye's office to have the work study. And with that, Izuku would end up having the Overhaul just encounter where he would end up seeing Eri. Izuku, who would recognize Overhaul after seeing some pictures of him from Night Eye, he would end up grabbing Eri by the hand, yanking her backwards before putting a portal beneath him, copying Hirogiri's quirk, as he would then fall into the portal, waving to Overhaul with a smile. As Izuku would put a portal into Night Eye's office before falling down, landing right on the chair with Eri in hand. What the hell? So, can you explain to me what happened? Night Eye would say, with Izuku holding Eri, who was now sitting on his lap, completely just confused, as she had bumped into him before looking up as if with a glance of her eyes, yelling for Izuku, pleading with him to save her, and that's exactly what Izuku had done, as she was sitting in Izuku's lap, just looking around, frantic, not sure if Overhaul was going to come out there any second and kidnap her with an instant. As Izuku was explaining how him and Miria were able to run into Overhaul on a lucky encounter, Izuku would end up grabbing Eri back, falling through one of the portals that he had made. As Mirio would nod his head, with Night Eye looking towards him, as Night Eye would then sigh. Izuku, why the hell did you have to do that? Now we stand the risk of Overhaul breaking into our office at any second. And sure enough, an explosion would end up being heard from down the hall. Izuku would calmly open the door, as he would end up seeing Overhaul looking around in a complete rage, as Izuku would say, leaning back into the office, yeah, he's here right now. All of a sudden, Izuku would end up being grabbed by the back of the neck, violently being pulled backwards. You! Where the hell is Eri? Overhaul would yell, as he would then slam Izuku down into the ground. By the way, I pronounce Eri and not Eri. I'm sorry about that. It's just something random that I've done. I'm sorry that I pronounce it wrong from how the anime pronounces it. I'm just stupid because I pronounce it Eri and not Eri. I don't know why I do it. I have no clue why. I'm just stupid. That's a simple explanation. Getting back into the story, Izuku would be slammed down into the ground, sending him flying down through the halls, as Izuku would copy Overhaul's quirk, jumping up before letting 2 fingers touch Overhaul, as all of a sudden Overhaul would splatter all over the place as his liquids and fluids would fly everywhere, painting the walls with red, as Eri, whose eyes were covered now with Mirio's hands, as Eri just being saved by Izuku. As all of this would be happening, Night Eye would walk out into the hallway before just shrugging his shoulders. Well, I guess that takes care of Overhaul then, as Izuku would stare directly down at his hands. He had never killed someone before, but yet he didn't care. He knew that Overhaul was the pure incarnation of evil. How dare he do something so vile to a little girl? He had heard stories of what Night Eye had told him, and Izuku just couldn't comprehend such a little girl being devolved into such a torture for her entire life. Years would end up passing, and Izuku and Uraraka would end up getting together and would start dating. And Izuku, of course, with the help of his mother, would end up taking a test to see if he was actually responsible enough. Remember, Izuku's only 15 still, to adopt Eri. Izuku had saved her and he felt a connection from the very beginning. And so he would adopt Eri, and Uraraka would also do so as well. And so, during UA graduation, Izuku would graduate, as he would end up just graduating with the rest of his class. And that is where he would end up proposing to Uraraka, and they would end up getting married, with Eri now their adopted daughter, as years would end up passing. Years now into the future, we see the number 1 hero, Copycat, standing above a ledge, looking down onto a city completely cleared out of crime. With Izuku the number 1 hero now, crime rates had completely dropped to almost near little percentage. No one had thought it could happen. With the help of Izuku, he had spread just the work of heroes and hero agencies into smaller towns and cities, rather than them just all being crammed into a massive city. Izuku had built up a reputation as the hero, or the people's hero, and so Izuku wanted to keep that, making sure he was completely respectful and always saving people in cities that many heroes would just completely avoid and not bat an eye to. And so Izuku and Uraraka would end up having a couple children, as they would end up passing through UA, with them having a mix of a gravity quirk and even a copy quirk, as they would end up being the new just big 3, with possibly Bakugo's child as well mixed in there, as that would end up becoming the new top 3 heroes in decades after this. And that is the alternate ending to What If Deku Had a Perfect Copy Quirk. I hope you all did enjoy the series, and I hope you all did enjoy both endings. I know some of you guys don't like dark endings, and a lot of you like happy endings, so I decided to do both. Since I really hadn't done any dark endings in a while, I decided to do one as the main ending, and mixed in a happier ending as the alternate one. I hope you all did enjoy What If Deku Had a Copy Quirk once again, or Perfect Copy Quirk. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.